A lot is changing, and the way through this, I think, Tom, is distributors have to build a modern profitability playbook that's grounded and powered on data and analytics. Here are some highlights of a recent conversation I had with Tom Gale about how distributors are migrating away from legacy profitability playbooks and into more modern profitability playbooks that are leveraging data and analytics. Now, this is part of a multi-series conversation, but we dive into the first capability that distributors really need to focus on improving in order to maintain and grow their record high profit levels.
Welcome to this edition of MDM's Quick Take. My guest this week is James Dorn of Dorn Group. Welcome, James.
Hey, thanks, Tom. It's great to be here with you and the MDM community.
I'm especially excited to have our conversation this week. Last week, we were together here in Denver for our Shift conference. We had more than 200 people in the room, and the focus on that was around the major transition in distribution that is taking place. We really are in a transition area where I believe those teams who have the talent and the culture to transform their legacy distribution go-to-market business model to a modern one will win. And there's a lot of ways to look at that. You can talk about it as, what a Gen 1 distributor looks like and a Gen 2. We've used those terms, but there's also the legacy model that has worked so well for so many distributors. It's primarily based on that outside sales model where digital has really become so much more critical to it. And the big piece of this really, and that was also brought into our conversation last week, is the fact that data analytics really is the foundation today to execute on any kind of transformation or change management project in a distribution business or manufacturing business today. And so what I'd like to focus on today, James, because where I think this all came to and just kept coming up over and over is really after what we've been through and all the turbulence of what's happened in the last few years is profitability is really the critical piece here going forward.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Tom. And if you were to connect the dots here, a lot of these distributors, they were not just doing data and analytics because technology has increased and software has become so proliferant with it. It's really connecting data and analytics to helping distributors become more profitable because especially when you look at like this post boom era in 2023, a lot of distributor businesses have increased both top line and bottom line. So the question now is, how do you continue to hit these record high levels of profit? Almost everybody we spoke to was bringing data and analytics into the organization in a bigger way in order to maintain those record high profits and protect them against what's coming in the future here. You start to look at some of the market factors, demand is slowing, price increases have slowed. There's a lot of uncertainty and consolidation still occurring in the markets. Beyond that, you look at some of these internal factors of what's happening inside of some of these distributorships. A lot of these distributors have highly experienced team members that are expected to be retiring in the coming years. So with that becomes this huge knowledge gap. And these organizations are saying, hey, how do we continue to compete as some of our best players are leaving? So, looking at some of that information as to how they can retain their talent. And, one other big thing we saw, Tom, was when you start looking at technology, it's changed so dramatically with e-commerce and now with AI coming. A lot of distributors are saying, hey, how do we keep up with this change, especially now that end customers are perfectly aligned with where technology is going, being the self-service end customer wanting to do more business online, wanting to do more self-serve types of activities. So a lot is changing, and the way through this, I think, Tom, is distributors have to build a modern profitability playbook that's grounded and powered on data and analytics. No longer can they rely on having a highly experienced team that's making a lot of these calls at the field level, at the branch level. They've got to build a better way to do business, and they're really grounding themselves on data and analytics.
So I always ask you this, but and especially coming away from last week, what are the action items? What are the components of what that profitability playbook looks like?
Yeah, I mean, Tom, we see these as there are a few key success factors in building these modern playbooks, and when we look across the ones that work versus the ones that don't, there's definitely a few themes that come to mind. One of them is they play more offense than defense. So distributorships are getting more aggressive with how they go to market, how they manage the business, and how they actually bring their teams together. It's playing more offense than defense. That's the first part. The second part of this, I think, Tom, is you have to move beyond what I'll call this legacy mindset and this legacy playbook. We're out there every day talking with leadership at distributors, and there are just some things that stick into my mind of like what I consistently hear. And I'll just break this into two, right? So here's what I hear from what I'll call quote unquote legacy playbook. It's comments like, hey, we've been successful. We have a playbook. We've relied upon it for years, if not decades. We're just going to stick with it. Or, moving forward, we're going to run faster and harder. So basically, we're going to make our team work harder and faster, and especially over the last few years, I don't know if that's possible, Tom. You'll hear things like, hey, we rely on great people to make great decisions. And this is probably the most common one. And it's done well for years with a highly experienced team, giving them the autonomy to do that. But moving forward, it's going to get harder and harder to do that. Or you'll hear this say, we've been doing pick, pack, ship for 100 years now. Why change what's already working? When you compare it against some of the other things that you hear with teams that are running more of a modern playbook, you'll hear things like, hey, we have to adjust to the digital future, one that rapidly evolves and it's not going to stop evolving. Or, hey, how do we capture all the knowledge across our experienced team, especially as they get closer to retirement? And how do we transfer that knowledge across our broader teams to help the up and coming generation make more informed commercial decisions? The biggest and probably most important here is, you know, how do we leverage data, analytics, and technology in new ways to be successful moving forward? And I think that's exactly what we heard and saw at the Shift conference, Tom, is modern distributors are grounding their playbooks on data and analytics and using technology to really drive that forward.
So what is give me an example. What do the new ways look like in terms of how distributors can leverage data and analytics?
Yeah, I think it comes down to building capability, Tom, in several areas. The first one we can tackle here, it's really around building capability around using enterprise profitability controls to maintain the record high profits that distributors have been really taking advantage of over the last few years here. And this gets into really looking across your enterprise company wide to say, hey, do we have the right resources and do we have the right strategies and processes to effectively manage and grow our revenue and profit? And in a lot of cases, Tom, there's a lot of companies that are still operating today where there's so much control and autonomy that's at the branch level versus consistently across all branches and maybe even rolling up to a corporate level, that this is easier said than done, right? And this is part of an evolution for a lot of companies out there is how do they find out what's winning at a branch level and spread that across all the other branches and get some consistency and get some best practices that can not only be adopted, but also that's going to be effective enough to work across different regions and locations. Part of doing this is, to really unearth what's working, what's not working is you got to have some type of evaluation on where the cost and price process breaks and where do we lose margin, where do we gain margin. And those are questions that can be unearthed, Tom, in some type of process evaluation. And that's something that we've seen a lot of distributors get more into as they look across the business to really understand more about that. Beyond that, once you've kind of got some of these areas identified, it really comes down to, I'll say, building this workbench or building this manufacturer workbench to capture every dollar that's available to you. And I'm still shocked by this, Tom, as to how many dollars are missed by distributors just simply not having the right process or the right teams in place to capture all the dollars that are available to you. And I'll give you an example on this, Tom. When you look at the type of distributors that are out there, most of these distributors who are doing this, they're capturing a lot of this work within the end of the year, the fourth quarter. And it comes down to, hey, in this workbench, do you have ability to fully capture all rebate dollars? Do you have the ability to capture your redistribution allowances, your special terms like 2% cash discount, net 10, co-op, all the marketing and development funds that are available to you? Doing this, you might have to have an organized system that, you can pick up 10 bips here or 10 bips or 20 bips there. And at the end of all this, you might be able to capture, let's just say 50 to 90 basis points that could add directly to your profit improvement and your bottom line. And that's a big amount, Tom. When you look at, let's just say you're a 10% net distributor and you've got 70 basis points of additional profit that hit your bottom line. That's a 7% profit increase that you're capturing just because you're implementing some of these enterprise controls as overall capability enhancements to your business.
James, great points. And speaking of the fourth quarter, we are following up on the Profitability Virtual Summit that we jointly produced in July with a data analytics virtual summit on December 6th. We're going to be diving deeper into data analytics as we've described today, because it is such a critical piece, I think, for teeing up next year for everybody. We're going to be putting more information about that out very quickly here, but save the date, December 6th. James, your final thoughts on that?
Yeah, looking forward to it, Tom. I think everything that we're talking about here today of profitability, all of it can be achieved by putting a larger emphasis on data and analytics and really getting your team well equipped to use data and analytics across each function of the organization and making it more accessible to them. So we're really looking forward to that event, Tom. It's got a great lineup of speakers, and there should be some really, really incredible presentations on how distributors can action data and analytics to help them achieve new levels of profitability moving forward.
James, thanks for the conversation. Look forward to the next one.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. It was great to be here. Thanks for watching today. If you'd like to receive more insights on this topic, feel free to reach out to MDM at mdm.com or us at the Dorn Group at dorngroup.com, and be sure to follow us on LinkedIn.